Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as I talk about year 2 of my plant nursery. So let's go. I'm in my garage today and I'm just potting up plants that I'm going to be overwintering. I figured I might as well chat with you about my plant nursery. There's been a lot of interest, a lot of questions, and I wanted to answer some of the questions that I've had recently. In fact, I had put out a YouTube poll asking you what were some of the things that you wanted to know in regards to my plant nursery. And I wanted to thank any of you that had answered the poll. That really helped me with figuring out what kind of questions a lot of you have. And before we dive into the questions, one thing I wanted to mention is I do have a lot of videos that I've made in the past having to do with my plant nursery. And what I'll do is I'll put links to those videos down in the description below in case you're interested. This is the end of year 2 for my plant nursery, and it was a really successful year. I definitely grew both in terms of plants, in terms of what I learned, and I even made more money this year than I made last year with my nursery, which was really nice. My nursery is located on my property where I live, up the driveway on the right-hand side. And I've had this nursery now for 2 full years. The reason that I started my nursery was because since I've been gardening for such a long time, I always end up with so many plants. And really, you can only give those plants away so many times to friends, families, neighbors. And also, I like sharing them with other people further away in other communities and even in other states. And it's not just the act of selling the plants. I also love being able to share my knowledge with other fellow gardeners. In case you're wondering how large my plant nursery is, I'll put the dimensions up on the screen. And at the end of this video, I will give you a tour of the plants that are in the nursery, just in case you're wondering what kind of plants I'm selling down there. In terms of my poll, I received 60 votes. Thank you for that. The highest percentage of questions came for, do I need a license to sell plants? And let's address that question first. When it comes to answering that question, I want to let you know that it's really going to vary from area to area, state to state, country to country. So what you want to do is you want to do a search on the internet for selling plants or a plant nursery, put in your area. So for me, I would say selling plants in New Hampshire. And based on that, I was able to easily find my state's website that pointed me to the rules, the regulations with selling the plants in New Hampshire. And there's going to be lots of different things to think about. Are you selling the plants locally in your area? Are you shipping the plants out? And it's all going to vary depending on that as well. So not only your location, but also how you plan to sell your plants. So for New Hampshire, I do have to pay a very nominal fee in order to be able to sell plants from my property. I also have to fill out paperwork every year, just listing the type of plants I'm selling. The next most popular question was, what plants do I sell? The first year of my plant nursery, the only thing I sold was perennials. I wanted to keep it simple. I wanted to keep it easy. And I will be going through that later in this video in terms of which perennials I'm selling. We'll do a field trip down to my nursery, which is just down the driveway, and I'll show you what I'm selling down there. This year, on top of selling perennials, I also sold vegetable plants. And in terms of vegetable plants, I just wanted to dabble with it a little bit. I wanted to sell anything that I had started from seed that I had an excess of, and I didn't need that much of. So in terms of some of the vegetable plants that I sold this year, it was not because they were plants that I figured would be popular. It was more that you buy a packet of seeds and you end up with so many seeds that it's just easier to start them all, even if I can't use all the plants. I sold onions because the shelf life of onion plants is so short. I wanted to start the whole packet. I also sold Swiss chard, broccoli, there was cauliflower, and cabbage. All of those did really, really well. They're cool season plants, so I sold them right during the springtime. Will I sell them again? I'm not going to say no, but it's not something that I care to sell again for the reason that they're not plants that I really care to have in my garden. I think it's nice to be able to make videos to show all of you plants that you can be starting in the springtime and all of that. But they're not necessarily vegetables that my family eats a lot of. So I don't know if I want to give up the grow light space for selling the cool season plants. However, I will tell you there was a lot of interest in tomatoes. And that was something that I didn't start from seed, partially because I ran out of time. I was just so busy taking care of all my flowers that I'd started from seed, as well as those cool season plants. So I'd rather spend my time growing something that, first of all, that my family can eat, like tomatoes, and then being able to sell those because there was just so much interest in the tomatoes. Speaking of tomatoes, I want to place an order for tomato seeds. And I've heard that there's a lot of interest in heirloom tomatoes. If there's a tomato that you love, that you highly recommend that I could sell for my nursery, please drop it down in the comment section below because I really am looking for help on which tomatoes to grow from seed for next year. There are so many different varieties out there, and I don't want to grow every single variety. I want to limit myself. I'm not sure to how many tomato plants or tomato varieties, I should say, but I definitely want to limit myself. So please let me know which varieties you like. There was also a lot of interest in peppers, and I did sell peppers this year. I love peppers, so I definitely will be selling those again. And the peppers that I sold were habanero, jalapeno, and bell peppers, a couple of different colors of bell peppers. I also sold some herbs. I sold basil, and that was really popular. I will be selling that again. Basil is something that my family uses, so it's worth it for me to grow that. And then it's also a popular herb that people like to buy. I had chives. They're a perennial here where I live, and some of those sold, but I really need to push the chives early in the spring. I didn't push them hard enough. The reason is the chives were down in my plant nursery, so people didn't really see them. So I need to take some of the plants of chives out of my plant nursery and put them along with my other vegetable plants that I'm selling, because normally my vegetable plants are out on the rolling cart that I have that as I'm hardening off all my plants. For vegetable plants, I'm not sure if there's anything else that I'm going to sell. I don't want to go too crazy when it comes to vegetable plants. I might possibly sell some lettuce though for a cool season plant. We love lettuce, but we prefer to eat our lettuce indoors under my grow lights. It's just so convenient to be able to just take the lettuce from indoors rather than go outside and have to clean it. However, I do realize that a lot of people do like fresh lettuce, and that would be something that would be very easy to grow and very easy to be able to sell as part of my nursery. So when it comes to annual flowers, I love to grow flowers from seed. I love to collect my own seeds, and I love to start them indoors under my LED shop lights. There was a lot of interest from people wanting to buy my flowers that I'd started from seed. They saw them hardening off on my rolling rack, and I was very hesitant to sell them because I didn't know how much I need for myself in terms of all the pots, the containers, planting them in my landscape. So I said no, that I wasn't selling my annuals. Now I ended up with an abundance of annuals because I just didn't know how much I needed. So I know that I should be able to sell annuals next year, annual flowers. So I am planning to do that. And that will, I do usually limit myself on which plants I'm starting from seed. So I'll be starting a bigger variety of plants from seed, both from myself as well as from my nursery. And when it comes to which plants will I be selling for part of my plant nursery, definitely the shade plants, because I grow so much in terms of shade plants because I do have a lot of shade in my yard. So lots of coleus, lots of impatiens, as well as wax begonias. I'll also be selling a lot of dahlias because I have been overwintering my dahlia tubers for a number of years. And so I have a large stock of dahlia tubers now, and I don't need that many dahlias. So I'll be selling potted dahlia plants as well. A few plants that people ask me about specifically for bringing in the pollinators in their garden were alyssum, which I did grow a lot of, but I didn't sell any last year, but I will sell going forward. There was a lot of interest in alyssum as well as marigolds. So I'm definitely planning to sell both of those plants next year. Now, I don't have a lot of sun in my yard. However, I have seeds of sunflowers. So I will probably dabble with selling some sunflower plants. And in the past, I have grown zinnia, but I just haven't grown them for a few years. I'll definitely be growing zinnias, not only for myself, but also for my nursery, because I know there's going to be a large interest in those plants as well. And I'll keep you posted. I know there's going to be other annual flowers that I'll be selling. I just don't know right now which ones they'll be, but that's definitely going to be something that I'm offering next year, are lots of annual flowers. 4 plants that people saw that there was a large interest in, people wanted to buy, but I wasn't selling, were lavender, delphinium, lupin, and foxglove. So my goal for next year is to offer those plants for sale as well. I think part of it is they're popular plants, they're beautiful plants, and in many cases, they're plants that people have a hard time growing from seed themselves. And since I've had success growing those plants from seed, I might as well grow them again for myself as well as for selling. I do realize though with my nursery, I do have to be a little careful not to go overboard with plants. I have to limit myself with what I want to grow for myself and what I want to grow for selling. And I think that's really important if you have a plant nursery, to limit yourself as well, because it can get overwhelming. And there is that factor of there's only so much room, both indoors in terms of grow lights, outdoors if you're doing winter sowing, and then just in terms of time when it comes to babying and watering all these plants. So in terms of the poll, the next question that I had that I did get some interest in was, how do I market my plants? The first year I had my plant nursery, I marketed the plants both through Facebook Marketplace as well as Craigslist. And this year, which was my second year with the nursery, I only marketed my nursery through Facebook Marketplace. And there were 2 reasons for that. The first reason was most of the interest that I had the first year came from Facebook Marketplace. There was very little interest that I got in terms of emails when it came to Craigslist. Also, I didn't love getting the emails through Craigslist because honestly, you can't look up the person that's writing you that's interested in buying plants. And since I have people coming to my house to buy plants from me, I do like it that I can at least look up their profile and see who they are. I'm sure people do the same for me. They want to see, who is this person that's selling the plants. So there's that little bit of comfort being able to look up a person and see their profile before they come to my house. I also like on Facebook Marketplace that there are ratings. And so people can look me up and they can see what kind of rating I have as a seller, which I think is comforting for them. And when it comes to the Facebook Marketplace, I just have a listing that's out there. And I'll be going over that with you just because I know there was some interest on what does the listing look like. But in terms of that listing, it's just a 1 page and it lists out all the plants that I'm selling, how much I'm selling them for. And I don't market that page through groups. For example, we have like lots of different groups in New Hampshire that have to do with gardening. I don't market my page on there, but a friend of mine that has a backyard plant nursery recommended that I do that, that I put it out there so that people see it, just to, get more exposure. So I recommend that you do the same thing. I think it's a great way to market your plants, not just put it out there as a for sale page, but to actually market that for sale page out within different groups within Facebook. So I'm planning to do that for next year. That's something new for me, is to still have the page that I have put out there that people have bookmarked or saved. I'm going to keep that as my main page, but I'm also going to market my nursery by putting it in different local gardening groups that are on Facebook Marketplace. On my poll, I also had a section that basically said, what other questions do you have that you want to know about in terms of the nursery? And this viewer asked a question, How do I organize the spaces I use so that I am most efficient and productive? Well, I'm still learning about that. I have limited space down there, and I do want to be efficient with my space as well as productive with it. The first year that I had my nursery, I put everything out there in terms of just rows and rows. And what I found was it wasn't the best method for me, because what was happening was plants that were short were being shaded by the taller plants. And that wasn't very good. And then also plants that were very tall, like let's say bee balm or a coneflower, not only were they shading out the shorter plants that were near them, they were also flopping over. The same problem happened as I entered this year. And I told myself, I can't do this again next year. I need to come up with a better system that's a little more organized. So for this year, as I've been working in the nursery and potting up plants and moving plants around, reorganizing my nursery, I've moved more towards I'd call it a block system. And it's where I have certain sections that are in a block for each type of plant. So for example, I would have all of my bee balm, which tends to be very tall, in one block, in one area within a block. So what's nice about that is as the plants grow and they get taller, they're going to lean on each other and they're not going to block any other plant. But what also will be nice, I believe, with the system, and I'll find out next year and I'll definitely share it with you if it works or not, is that within each of those blocks, when I have those tall plants like bee balm or coneflower, some of the other tall plants that tend to fall over and are leggy are like obedient plant. What I can do then is I can add some sort of trellis system around the block if I want to do that. And that way I'm keeping the plants confined within, within this little square section with a trellis all around it. And when I say trellis, I think that what I'm talking about is more like T-posts or something like that, and just putting some sort of rope around it. And I'll show you next year what I come up with, but something to just keep that block of plants confined so that they're not just falling over and they're all just leaning up against each other. And also what I hope to do is do the Chelsea chop on some of the taller plants that would benefit from that, so that they don't get so tall and leggy, but instead they're shorter, they're more compact and bushier. And I think just by doing those couple of things, I'll have a better year next year in terms of all my plants and how they're organized. Also, there are plants down there that are sun loving, and then there are plants down there that are shade loving. I'm trying to keep the plants that do better in the shade towards the back of my nursery where it is shadier. And the plants that prefer sun, I've moved those towards the front of the nursery because it's definitely sunnier towards the front. And that's one thing I did learn, is that I don't want to have those shade-loving plants towards the front because they'll get fried and they won't be happy. Along the same lines, when we talk about how to make this space efficient, I have tried to keep the rows in between each grouping of plants to a minimum. I want the rows to be wide enough so that I can comfortably walk in those rows as well as anyone else that wants to walk in those rows. But I don't want to waste space. So I've tried to keep the rows to a minimum. They're a little tight, but the space is tight. I don't have a lot of space down there. So I'm trying to maximize on the amount of space that I have for my plants while keeping the walking rows to a minimum. And I'm trying to also keep the weeds down. So in terms of my efficiency with not having to weed that often, I have used wood chips down there in between the rows where the walking rows are. And I'm using wood chips to help suppress the weeds. And that has worked out really well for me. And you can get the wood chips for free through Chip Drop, but also I've had some trees cut down, which I've had to pay for. And when I've had the trees cut down, I've asked the arborist to leave the wood chips for me. and I take from those wood chips then, and I can use them in my plant nursery for suppressing the weeds. Another question that I had was basically, how do I come up with my pricing? I like to go to local garden centers, and I do that early in the spring as well as throughout the year. And I like to see how they're pricing their plants because I realize that the pricing of plants is going to vary. So I recommend that you do the same thing if you have a plant nursery or you're thinking of selling plants, to go to your big box stores as well as just smaller size garden centers and get a general idea of how much are they selling their vegetable starts for, or how much are they selling their perennials for. And it's also important to note what size container they're selling their plants in. And that's especially true for the perennials. If you're thinking of selling perennials, are they selling them in gallon size pots? Are they selling them in something small like these? I like to be competitive with my pricing, but I do like to be on the lower side of that pricing. I don't want to be selling my plants for more than what the garden centers are selling their plants for. In terms of how much have I made this year, the best way I can describe that is I made enough to, first of all, offset any costs for running my nursery, although my costs are very, very minimal because a lot of the plants I'm selling are plants that were divisions from my own yard. They were plants that I started from seed, and the seeds were seeds that usually I bought on clearance at the end of the season, or they were seeds that I collected myself, which that's free. The pots that I sell my plants in, I no longer buy my pots. The first year I had my nursery, I bought my pots. That is an expense, but I'm able to get my pots for free from a local nursery, as well as people that just buy plants from me. A lot of times they'll return pots, which is great. So I don't buy any more of my pots. My potting soil, at least for right now, I've been able to get for free from a local transfer station. So there's no cost there. But those are all things that you need to take into account. I had someone once say to me, "Oh, wow, you can just sell plants for free." It really depends on how you do it. Because if you're bringing in plugs, which some people do, they bring in plugs from local sources, that's a cost that you need to keep in mind. Or if you're buying your potting mix, or if you're buying your pots, you need to keep all of that in mind when it comes to how are you going to price your plants. Personally, I don't want to price my plants more than the local nurseries are selling their plants for. I want people to feel like they're getting a bargain when they come here to buy my plants. So I make enough money to offset my costs that I incur for having a nursery. The money that I make definitely covers a family vacation that my family can take every year. And it also covers my hobby of being able to buy perennials for my gardens or seeds that I want to just start for myself. So it's definitely enough to cover all of those types of costs, which is nice because my backyard plant nursery for me is just a small little side hustle. If I wanted it to be something more than that, I could do that. But for my purposes, I just like having this extra pocket cash because I also want to be able to have more time to just enjoy my own garden and work in my flower beds. I like to make videos for YouTube. I need to edit those videos, and that takes some time. So for me, the plant nursery is just a side hustle. So it's really what you want to turn your nursery into and how much time you want to dedicate to it. On my poll, one of the other questions that I had put out there was, does anyone want to know, like, what are my hours? And there was very little interest in that, but I am going to go over it just to go over it. On my Facebook Marketplace listing, I mentioned that it's by appointment only. And what that means is I don't have set hours for my nursery. And so I like people to let me know a day and a time that they want to stop by. And if that works for me and if that works for them, then we schedule an appointment and they can stop by. So it's really Monday through Sunday, and it's during daylight hours. because I do tend to be home a lot. I like being home. I like being in my garden. I really enjoy that. I like to have flexible hours that work for me as well as anyone that wants to buy the plants. And I've found that that has worked really well because on a busy day, I might have 4 or 5 appointments in a day. I like to schedule my appointments so that they're in 1 hour increments. In other words, someone might tell me they're coming at 11 o'clock. So if someone else wants to schedule an appointment, I'll just make sure from 11 to 12, I'm not booking anything. And the reason I do that is I like to just give that attention and time to the person that's buying plants from me. And I've found that the few times that I have had an overlap and I've had 2 people here at the same time, it's just too chaotic, too busy. And then I feel like I'm not able to answer all the questions that the buyer has. So that's how I do it, by appointment. And then once I schedule an appointment, I don't book any other appointments during that window, during that 1 hour window block. My friend Pam, who has a backyard plant nursery, for her, what she does is she has basically the weekends fully dedicated to her nursery. And that seems to work really well for her. She does take appointments too, but she's pretty much, open on the weekends for the whole day on Saturday and Sunday. And that seems to work really well for her business model. Another friend of mine that has a backyard plant nursery, her name is Linda. Her business model is more, she does by appointment only, but she's mostly selling during particular days of the year. And it's all day long on like a Saturday, the whole entire day. And it's a very, very busy day for her. She has a lot of people that are coming in for that sale. And that has worked really well for her. So there are different ways that you can do it. You want to do it based on your schedule and what works best for you. Because maybe you work a full-time job, so you're not able to have people stop by on the weekdays and you only want them stopping by on the weekends. Then maybe that model works best for you. Or you might want to do it like I do, which is by appointment only, and it could be Monday through Sunday. So when it comes to selling the plants, you want to come up with a schedule that works best for you. And you might try it one way and you might find that it's not working very good and you might need to modify it. So play around with that in terms of your open hours and when you want to be selling your plants.
Okay, friends, it's been a number of days since I recorded this video, and as some of you know, I've been fighting a cold, so I wanted to finish the video by giving you a tour of the plants that are down here. And I'm just going to show you a snapshot of what the plants look like. Remember, I live in New Hampshire, Zone 5B. It is the end of October, and our weather is getting quite cold. In fact, the temperatures lately have been dipping down into the high 28-degree Fahrenheit range. So the plants might look a little bit sad, but at least it gives you an idea of what plants I'm selling in my nursery. Before I start the tour, I wanted to point out a few things which anyone with a backyard nursery might be dealing with. This right here is a large pot of heuchera, and I've been meaning to divide it. I haven't gotten to it, but I can tell you, since it's been very, very dry, the plants don't look happy. They are sad. They need a lot of water, but the nighttime temperatures are freezing right now. So I have to be careful with running the water to them. So I will be watering them in a few days when things warm up around here. But those are things to keep in mind. You want to make sure your plants are well watered in your nursery, especially when you are not having any rain. Another thing I want to point out is I like to heel my plants in. That means the plant is in the ground. It's almost like taking a plant and just putting it in the ground where you're protecting the roots. But in this case, I'm protecting the roots, but the plants are in their own pots. So that's a good thing to do if you have the space and your temperatures get really cold like my temperatures do. This method will definitely protect my plants because they're all huddled in together, and it'll just give them a better chance of survival through our harsh winters. And then finally, if I have time this fall, I will be coming in and cutting back any of the perennials that are in here, just so that it makes my job easier in the springtime. But if I don't get to it this fall, I'll definitely be doing that in the springtime. Notice that plants are in squares or blocks. This block here, these are chives. We have English daisies, and I winter sowed these, and I want to show you. Look how pretty they are. They are so happy in the springtime as well as in the fall time. I have a ton of the great blue lobelia. And in fact, you can see that one or two of them are still blooming. Here is chocolate chip ajuga. There are a few kind of sedum, as well as the fringe-leafed bleeding heart. A ton of black-eyed Susan, or Rebecca. And I want you to notice the size of these pots. Pretty much all my plants are in small 3-inch pots. Pachysandra, which is a ground cover. Lamium, and that's also a ground cover. And while we're talking about ground covers, this right here is sweet woodruff. Lungwort, or pulmonaria, has beautiful blooms in the early spring months. And then a whole bunch of different kinds of hosta. This whole section here is bee balm. And I spent a lot of time dividing my bee balm about a month ago. So even though they look dormant, they will take right off next year. And by the way, I still have plenty of bee balm that I still need to divide if I have the time. These guys still need to get healed in. These are different kinds of daylilies. Well, they're covered with leaves, but you can kind of see them. This is European ginger, and that does really well in the shade and moist areas. And there's an ornamental grass here. It's called ribbon grass. Who doesn't love coreopsis? This is the Zagreb coreopsis. And in case you're wondering, there are a few gaps here. I recently made a sale of plants, and so some plants were pulled, which is totally fine. Isn't that sweet? Even with the freezing temperature, this little guy is still blooming its head off. This whole section here, these are all obedient plant. And I have the shorter varieties, I have the taller varieties, I have ones that are pink as well as ones that are purple. And that goes down all the way down to here. So I have quite a bit of that. Okay, these guys look sad. They really need to just be cut back. But these are autumn joy sedum. I have a bunch of yarrow or yarrow, and I have the white color as well as the pink color. I winter sowed Baptisia or false indigo, and they were from seeds that I had collected myself. Well, when you have so many seeds, why not just throw them all in a couple of milk jugs? I ended up with hundreds and hundreds of the Baptisia, and even though I sold quite a few this year, I still have quite a few to sell next year and probably the year after. But all of these were potted up this season, so they'll be a nice size come next year. I have a ton of iris, a lot of Siberian iris, as well as bearded iris, all different colors. And in fact, these little teeny tiny guys, these were winter sown last winter. So they look really sweet, very cute. And they'll put on some good size next year. But a ton of iris to sell for next year. And those are usually very popular. This is a perennial geranium, the big root geranium. I love the smell of it, the leaves. It's just very scented. These look like daylilies, but they're not. They are spiderwort or Tradescantia. And then going in this direction here is lady's mantle. Now, I dug up all my lady's mantle, so I put it down here, but I do intend to bring a lot of it back into my own landscape. I don't intend to sell all of this. These are heuchera or coral bells, and if I don't get to dividing them, they're just going to get healed into the ground, and I can always divide them next spring. Different kinds of dianthus, as well as sweet william. I'm just showing you snippets of plants that I have here and there that need to get healed in, but I have the same plants in other places. This is creeping phlox, a very popular plant in the springtime. I have a ton of echinacea all over in different areas, and I need to heal all of those in. So this is just some of many echinacea plants that I have. It's really hard to do this tour with all the leaves, but I know you understand. These are foxglove that I had winter sown. And again, remember, anything I'm showing you at this point in the video, I have plenty of these plants in other places. This is just a snippet of what I have for each of these plants. So these are foxglove. I do sell the perennial vinca ground cover, so I just wanted to show you that. I don't typically pot it up because I have so much of it, but if someone wants a ground cover and I recommend it and they want that, I do sell that. And it's not invasive here in New Hampshire, so it's totally fine. This was very popular last year. This is columbine. These are beautyberry. This was an experiment for me a couple of years ago. A friend of mine gave me the seeds, and I haven't shown you in any of my videos, but one of my beautyberries actually bloomed and had purple berries on it. It was really pretty. It's just not a plant that you often see here in New Hampshire. I know I'm forgetting other plants like spirea, hydrangea. I have a lot of different plants that I'll be offering next year that I haven't offered these past 2 years. So I'm very excited about that. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel and don't forget to hit the notification bell because I'll be doing a lot more videos on my plant nursery in the upcoming year.
I hope I was able to address any questions that you might have regarding a plant nursery. But if you have any other questions, I'd love to hear from you. Please drop them down in the comment section below. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.